Alan, we've got something that can take us into the great outdoors. What is it?
It is the 2022 Toyota LandCruiser, the 300 Series GX. I think this car is significant for Toyota for several reasons. It's frequently, for the last little while anyway, in the top 10 best-selling cars in the country. This is the very, very base model for around $90,000.
Yes, and it goes up to, what, 140 nearly, plus on-road costs.
They've added a couple of top models to what the previous list had. So the Sahara, and there's a sport model, David.
Yes, sport, but it's sport for off-road.
Which, I don't know, that sounds a bit weird to me. Let's look at the looks. David, I'm a little disappointed. We've waited for, what, the better part of a decade. The old one ran for, how old was it? 12 years, 13 years, something like that. And this is what we've got. I can barely tell the difference between it and the old one. The big ticket item in this new model, now remember, it's a completely all new model from the ground up on Toyota's global architecture on frame. I thought their global architecture didn't have a frame, but you know, there you go. David, what's the biggest thing about this car?
Well, I think the engine is clearly gone from being able to get the V8. This is now a V6 twin turbo
There's
engine.
only a V6 twin turbo. This is a pretty clean and tidy engine bay. Not a lot of room under it.
And has the traditional don't touch covering over here, which is important for sound, but I think it's also tells people that it's an area you don't need to go close to.
Well, I just heard this thing drive up, and believe me, if sound deadening was the aim, they failed. Toyota have done a couple of other things as well. There's aluminium in the construction for the bonnet, I think the tailgate as well. The doors, David, are they aluminium?
No idea.
No idea. We'll look that up and tell you. I think the back, David, is a little bit plain Jane as well on this base model.
Or a little bit, no. I think it's quite a lot. Flat, bland, little bit of a dent
There's
there,
kind
but
of
that's
no
about all.
distinguishing characters on it at all. I mean, I know they've tried to de-feature it and make it look as utilitarian as possible, but boy, I really think they've pushed the boat out.
Because it doesn't have the third row of seats, the space in here is enormous. But Alan, I tried to put the baby seat in, and to get to the anchor points, I had to climb in, which is where the towing pack becomes wonderfully helpful, because you can get on it in order to get into it, in order to be able to...
Well, again, not your best angle.
Yeah. Alan, we've put this down. Why is that?
Because you can't see a thing when that's in the seat at the top, and I tried to lower this, but I couldn't find out how to lower the seats either.
Okay, I'm going to get in the back. I'm going to test where all the hanging on things are, because I'm going to need them all.
That's made worse because there's no side step.
Yeah. Now, plenty of room, nice lot of support. I'm sitting, I feel like I'm sitting up high. I've got a bit of a panoramic view with it. Of course, this is in the way, but...
PowerPoint in the back, but no USB. And because this is the base model, there's not a third row of air conditioning either. There's ducts, but no controls.
Here we go again. A little bit easier, a little bit more room to get in.
This looks quite basic inside, doesn't it?
Look, it hasn't progressed as far. That, I think, was your line about many things, and I think this is a good example of it. Traditional dials.
And this massive knob for drive mode selection. And it's got a drive mode button, but that doesn't seem to do anything. Perhaps it does when you're in the off-road modes. But have a look at this. I find that particularly uninspiring. It is only on this bottom model. The top models have a different system, but still with rows of buttons. And this, of course, has a smaller screen. Again, a little disappointing. I would have liked the bigger screen. And this is the selector for your off-roading. With high, low, you push it down, go into low for 4. Whoops, whoops. We don't want to leave that in 4 low while we're on the road. I think this is still not the best resolution, David. What do you think?
No, it doesn't appear sharp.
For 90 grand, I really would have liked a fully digital dash instead of just that tiny little, very old-fashioned thing in the middle. Actually, one thing I've noticed, Toyota have finally done away with the Dick Smith System 80 clock. The only clock seems to be this one.
Okay.
This is one car, albeit a very big one, where the drive mode button makes a huge difference. I put it into sport because coming out of this street is a little bit tight. And I've got a lot of car, this is well over 2,000 kilos, David.
And the nose seems to stick out more than...
Gets up and boogies.
Well, that's a feeling of good torque more than good power. It's not going to be something that's going to give you neck-snapping acceleration because it's just got to get so much weight going.
Well, of course, the towing capacity of this is, what, about 3,500 kilos?
It is 3,500, which
And
is
that's
another reason why it has a chassis.
All right, now we're turning onto a freeway. And I've got this just in normal mode. That feels like it has infinite power. Now we're behind a Prius. I'd sooner stick a dagger in my throat. What do you think? The ride now at 80, which is the speed limit, very comfortable. Are you comfortable? Maybe I shouldn't assume.
It is very much more car-like than perhaps its image was and its reality was in the past.
I'm now at 100, and one thing that I've noticed is that the steering, and this is, I don't quite understand this, you're an engineer, you might be able to explain it. The steering is still hydraulic steering, but it's got an electric actuator. Wouldn't that just make it electric steering?
No.
I don't know. I thought you'd be able to explain it to me. But the point I was going to make to you is that the lane control on this is by braking. One of my pet hates. You're flying along at the speed limit and then just all of a sudden it thinks you've gotten too close, so it brakes, and you can't turn it, you can't start the car with it turned off. You have to turn it off
every time
as you're going, which really irritates me. Now, the other thing is driving into car parks. This is a very tall car and you do feel like you're going to hit everything. My advice is note down the height of your car and put it on a sticky note here somewhere until you get used to it. But of course, David, this is made for off-roading. That's what it's built for. You know, those terrible Australian back roads, you know, with the, what do you call it, the corrugations. How many times have we driven over that, you know, in the recent decades, and you sort of think, gee, you know, like, how does suspension survive this? That's what this is built for. Now, the other thing that people might not know, David, is that Toyota in Australia started with Celestes. Tell me why it started with Celestes.
He brought in a number of trucks, LandCruisers, in order to work on the Snowy Mountain scheme.
And for those that don't know, the Snowy Mountain scheme is this enormous stored energy hydro system in the Snowy Mountains. Now, we didn't have any Toyota before that. But the interesting thing is that in America, they only had this LC300 doesn't go to America now, and they only had the petrol engine in the last one.
Yeah, America doesn't go with diesel nearly as much as we do.
I've taken this up to Pie in the Sky on that terribly, terribly windy road down through the sandstone canyons, and you certainly feel the weight of this at speed going around corners.
Yeah.
No question. This isn't a sports car. It's not even a sports SUV. It's just a proper off-roading SUV.
This is, you know, easy. It's not fluffy and light, but it's not heavy by any means.
Do you know how I'd describe it? Stately.
Okay.
Regal. You waft along in this kind of huge bubble. It's like driving your lounge room. Actually handles about as well as your lounge room.
I think of it like a tugboat, you know, that it's firm and it's solid and it whooshes and it's got power to plough through things.
Well, indeed it does. It does have what feels like endless power. Also the handling, the articulation off-road is second to none. Though I was reading in the bump, the kinetic suspension that the old models have, this doesn't seem to have it. The upper models have e-kinetic, don't ask me what the difference is, and this just seems to have good articulation. There's a vast amount of wheel travel in the back. as you can see, going over this bit of off-road track. But what it does do, it does well, and that is, it's meant to transport 5 or more people, depending on the model you've got, in comfort, relatively economically. It's designed to tow, it's designed to go off-road. It's not really designed to be around town, but that's what mostly they get used for. That's all this week, David, for Toyota's LandCruiser 300 series. It's the big wagon. I think for me, it actually hits a spot. It does everything it says on the box. But David, it's that time.
Indeed. We need to leave a like,
make a comment,
or
over there to subscribe.